Hello and welcome back to Nathan Bell's podcast. Be sure to like, subscribe and share with your friends. Today Nate would like to talk about slavery.
Yeah, well, I've always been baffled by slavery, isn't it? This awful thing. And it's amazing because slavery has existed for the majority of history. And it's only in modern times in certain parts of the world where we've said slavery is not acceptable. And there are still many parts of the world where slavery exists. And there is particularly still a prevalence of sexual slavery. Most slavery is illegal now, but there was a time for a very, very long time where slavery was institutionalized and legal and perfectly acceptable. And that was the culture at the time throughout history, that you could say, I'm going to come in, I'm going to capture this person from their home, I'm going to put them in a cage, I'm going to take them across the country somewhere else, even to another country, and I'm going to force them to do labour and to serve me, and I'm not going to pay them, and I'm only going to feed them enough so that they don't die, and they're going to have no freedom or choice or control over their own life or their own destiny at all. I'm going to seize total control of their life and their destiny and their future and rob them of a future, and force them to spend their life in servitude to me. And that was absolutely the standard norm for a great long period of history in many parts of the world. And it just baffles me that people can do that to each other. It's so psychopathic. And, when I think about how prevalent slavery has been throughout history, that's when I think, there's no reason to say that people are inherently good. Many people throughout history, thousands, millions of people have owned slaves. Many millions and thousands of people have been willing to steal another person's life from them, and claim complete ownership over them and force them to live in servitude to them, and give them poor conditions to live in and beat them and torture them, and mistreat them. So why would you say, given that that was the norm for so long for so many people, why would you say that people are inherently good? Slavery is the perfect example of why we can see constant ongoing abuse throughout history in the human species. And in my view, the human species history is full of constant ongoing abuse of other human beings and of animals. It seems to me that more often than not, humans are more than happy to abuse other humans and to abuse animals in the natural world. So why would you say that anyone is inherently good? Why is there any reason to think that anyone is inherently good? That's just a naive falsehood that naive people believe. And slavery is the perfect example of that. It's a terrible tradition which has been ingrained in many cultures for a very, very long time. And there are still people in this part of the world, and you look around Australia and Australians think, oh, we're all lovely people in Australia, we don't do anything wrong, we don't have any malicious or cruel thoughts. I don't buy that. I know there are people in the community who, if they could, if it was still legal and acceptable, they would have slaves working for them. There are still people in America who believe that it should still be that way and they should still be able to keep slaves. There are plenty of people psychopathic like this who, if they could, if they were allowed to legally, they would have people serving them as slaves. So if the laws changed tomorrow and the government said, oh, if you want to have a slave, you can have a slave, so many people would jump at it, and so many Australians would happily take people slaves. Don't delude yourself and think that people are against slavery. There's plenty of people in the community who would jump at the opportunity to capture people and force them to work for them, and they wish the world could be that way again. And there's no shortage of people who think that way. So it's a good thing that the culture has changed in some parts of the world, and we've moved away from this claiming ownership of other humans. That is the righteous, virtuous view, is that humans don't own each other. We're all sovereign, free, independent individuals, deserving of our own choice and control over our own lives and our own destinies, and that's how it should be. That is the ethical high ground to take, is that people are individual sovereign entities in control of their own lives, and that nobody owns anyone. But yeah, there are still parts of the world where this sort of thing goes on. There's particularly a lot of sexual slavery and there's a lot of people particularly females, who get kidnapped and forced into lives of slavery, particularly sexual slavery. And I often think about, I wonder at this moment, how many human beings around the world are sexual slaves being held captive for sexual purposes, and being forced to perform sexual acts, and they have to do that for the duration of their lives. That is their whole existence. Geez, I feel blessed that I don't live a life like that. I read a story once about a boy who got kidnapped when he was about 7, and they found him about 10 years ago, and he was about 20 when they found him, and he's finally free from his captor. But his captor had kept him for nearly 20 years and forced him to perform sexual acts on him. For nearly 20 years, this boy lived this way, being a sexual slave after being kidnapped as a child. So it happens. It's still out there. There is still slavery, and there are still people who will take slaves given the opportunity. And I'm telling you, if the laws changed tomorrow and the government said to Australians, you can all have slaves, so many tens of thousands of Australians would immediately go out and claim people as their slaves if it was legal again. So don't think that everyone's against it and that all of a sudden we're this virtuous country where everyone hates slavery. There's an abundance of people who would love to have slaves. They would love it. They would absolutely love it. There's no shortage of them. And it's a completely psychopathic, ruthless attitude if you're the sort of person who would keep someone a slave. But people have done it all throughout history. So it just shows how completely ruthless and psychopathic so many human beings are. So why would you think that anyone is inherently good? Why would you say that human beings are inherently good? As I said, that's a naive falsehood that naive people believe. Human beings are not necessarily inherently good. And if you look throughout history, there has been more slavery and more abuse and more hurt and more neglect and more violence than there has been good done by people. So, human beings are not inherently good. And as I said, slavery is the perfect example of how psychopathic and ruthless and cold and heartless some people are, and how little some people regard the welfare and lives and value of others. So thank God we've taken the moral high ground in our society and we don't allow slavery anymore, and let's continue down that positive path towards viewing people as being individual sovereign entities with value. So that's some thoughts on slavery. So drop a comment in the comment section about what you think about slavery.